I met was a fly with a hook and the sky with no cloud. The heat was hot and the ground was dry. The air was full of sound. See, I've been through the desert on a horse with no name. She lifted me out of the rain. In the desert, you can't remember your name, 'cause there ain't no one to give you no pain. Sing it out now. La 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 la, hey hey.
Well, welcome back, viewers. It's James Kalm, the guy on the bike, and we're out here in Bushwick on an Easter Sunday afternoon. We're going to run into David&SCHWEITZER, and we have cajoled our way into getting C. Michael Norton to give us a little walking tour around his current show of new work titled When Paintings Awake.
Hey, Laura.
Hi, Michael. That's James Kalm, please. Well, let's first start over here and we can talk about some of the things. One of the things that they bring up in the press release is that you're dealing with a lot of large-scale painting here. And I was commenting on some of the paintings that I've seen recently. It seems like a lot of people have sort of reduced the scale, and I don't know whether that's maybe going back to something that was before the Abstract Expressionists, or maybe it's just an economic thing, but you've decided to go with the big paintings. You want to talk about that a little bit, your scale?
The scale is important for me because it's the human quality, the human size of the pieces.
Like this piece here has got to be, what, about 7 by 15 feet, something like that?
It's 90 inches by 144 inches.
Okay, so
it's almost 8 by 12. It's a diptych. It took me 2 years to make this piece. And some of this work takes a long time to do. It's
right.
Layer upon layer upon layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of work. In the early part of the 2000s, I would work primarily on the wall, just the wall. Now I started to work on the floor as well, where I will let a lot of the debris of what's going on with the painting on the wall fall around my feet on the linen. When that starts to become more conscious I start paying more attention to that consciously, I'll stretch it and put it up on the wall and continue to work on it at that point.
But you're saying that you feel like the scale allows you to get more of a human, like a performative thing, where you actually feel like you're physically, like Pollock used to say, in the painting somehow?
Maybe. It's like, I hate to cop some words from Jackson Pollock, but that
could be someone, a lot of worse people.
Could be some of what's going on. But I find it incredibly, I love the physicality of these things. And part of that physicality comes out of a dream state that turns itself into consciousness. I think there's a moment between being awake and being asleep where you end up doing that dream thing where you can hold a thought or an emotion that can't be held in a totally conscious state. And that's kind of what these paintings are trying to do. They're trying to hold that area within that level of understanding of how we think and how we feel as human beings.
Okay. So this piece is titled Stryker, and it's a diptych. And you've got a pretty large wing over here that's totally, well, I guess there is this little bit of stuff going on there, but basically this is just raw linen, and maybe you got rabbit skin glue on there. Is that what you're priming that with?
Glue, although it comes off like that, it's actually acrylic emulsion, and it's what I
sort of like matte medium? Right.
With, and I use a roller. And as you apply the emulsion onto the linen, it never takes to a piece of linen the same way. So you're always going to get a different pattern. So I use the edge of the roller, I use the flat part of the roller. A lot of times, as a painter, I used to do house painting a lot, and these skips and jumps in the surface of the linen they call them holidays when you're actually painting the wall in the house, and they don't
that's
want them.
that's a nice term, yeah.
I like to take a lot of holidays when I'm actually...
So as the roller goes around, there are sections of it that have less fluid in there, and the gaps would be the holidays. Let's look at this piece over here a little closer. Now, all this is acrylic, right?
It's all acrylic.
And then you've got these thick, is that
It's gel medium.
gel medium? Okay.
Heavy matte medium.
And, well, you got a lot of that stuff on there, so does this get pretty heavy when you start
This is heavy, yeah.
putting some of this stuff on, like
Yeah.
half an inch thick or 2 inches thick, and then big hunks of dried pigment and things? And yeah.
What happens is that I was educated as a sculptor. I have my MFA in sculpture, metal casting, and fabrication.
Okay.
So I don't really think like a traditional painter. I think
You
more
like the
a-
chunky stuff.
I think more like a sculptor, and I actually build these paintings more than I paint them. I use construction tools. I use mud knives and that kind of thing. Tape, mud and tape, literally, to put these paintings together.
Well, just like somebody making a house, you know. I did a lot of sheetrock working myself, which is mud and tape. This is kind of an interesting piece. This is titled, what is it? Pink River Run, 2016. And this is actually a digital print. So this piece of linen and what looks like strokes of paint are actually photographs, but then you've added some kind of nice chunky strokes of your gel medium and stuff on there. I thought this was interesting because it really does kind of make you question just where does the photographs of the brush strokes end and the actual brush strokes begin, which I think is kind of one of the interesting questions that a lot of people are asking these days. We're going to keep moving through here. This is another large piece.
Because there is no brush involved. It's just these are construction tools I use. I don't use a paintbrush.
You don't use a paintbrush.
I don't use a paintbrush. It's tape,
All rollers and
roller.
palette knives and...
Yep.
The other thing I was noting, and you kind of mentioned, is they're talking about Gerhard Richter and the way that he does a lot of squeegeing, and maybe this goes back to you're using the scale and like you said, having done a lot of sculptural work and construction work, like this edge here of this pink, you obviously had like a piece of paper or something like that that you laid down there and sort of smushed.
Almost like-
This is a technical term, smushing.
Yeah, smushed. I like that. I like that. That's a good term.
And so you're kind of doing some painting and then pulling up pieces of paper that you've laid down, sort of like stencils, and all of this is kind of, and then even some of this you've got, like I say, it's probably the smushing of the paper that you pulled off one other place and then stuck it back down somewhere
A lot of
else.
these,
And
like this particular piece started on the floor. So this kind of stuff is like, I worked on another piece that had the white and the green, the phthalo green, and it was just a matter of throwing a piece of tape on the floor that was loaded up with that color and then seeing what was happening and walking over and pulling that tape off the canvas.
and this is titled Working Title.
Called
Nice.
Working Title, yeah.
Nice and self-referential. I like the way that these edges of these forms, and I guess maybe you had torn paper or something that you used here, but
It's all tape. It's all tape.
It's all tape.
I use tape as a drawing medium. And so it's like I'm thinking in reverse a lot. I'm extraordinarily dyslexic. And it's very helpful for me to think in 3 dimensions and to block things out with literally blue tape or masking tape. And what I'll do is I'll tear the edges of that tape and then fit that tape within the confines of what I'm trying to get as a shape.
so I liked what you said about abstract expressionism. You said you don't consider this work abstract expressionism?
I don't. No, I don't.
Tell us where you diverge from that.
I think it's because of the materiality and the way that I actually approach it and the way I constrain what's happening with the action of the action painters and the way I try to constrain that and the way I try to hold it in as it's trying to push itself out.
So what you're saying is that there's kind of a more of a conceptual aspect to it that maybe the action painters wouldn't have,
There is a conceptual aspect.
and that the conceptual part of it has to do with the way that you're fabricating it and kind of the process and maybe the rules that you use in the fabrication differs from the just kind of the open pour out your guts kind of abstract expressionism.
Exactly. There's something more calculated and formal about this. There's a formal attitude towards this that I don't think that they had. the other thing is that I'm thinking, although you think about de Kooning, and he did think about cartoon things, but basically, if I'm more involved with guys like, I was really affected by Combos in France, Harvey de Rosa, by
Figuration Libre artists. I love those guys.
Yeah, okay, so basically what that is that gave me my color. Being in France, I lived in France for a while, and I knew these guys. I showed with this in the same gallery.
Back in the early 80s, mid-80s.
In the early 80s, yeah. And so
that's fun.
I got that color sensitivity by being in the south of France and also being exposed to that sort of wild and crazy naivete that they had, because they actually came from the province. These guys were basically farmers.
Sure.
That came to the city.
And saw rock and roll videos and cartoons and underground comic books and stuff like that, and sort of got carried away.
Yeah.
Do you think that your expressionism has a lot of humor in there?
There's emotion, and there can be some levity, and there is a sense of humor to these paintings. There's definitely a sense of humor, but there's also it's like anything human. You have this humorous quality, and then there's a very serious edge, and it can all exist on the same plane at the same time. You don't have to separate it. It can be what it is. It can be human. It can be human. We can be humans.
Okay.
And the painting can be human, and that's the way I think about it.
Okay, let's look at this other large piece. Actually,
this is called Things Lost That We're Not Aware of.
Things Lost That We're Not Aware of. And this is great because we've got the afternoon sun coming in through the windows. But in this case, you've got a lot of this resin in here, and it really does affect a lot of the way the colors come through and the pigments, and also how it lets you read the surface, because it really closes out the weave, but adds a very kind of an interesting layer of surface there. This is another big painting, right? This is also
this is
about
160 wide by 90 high, so it's almost 14 feet wide by
7.5 feet tall.
7.5
Yeah.
feet, yeah.
So here, this is sections of masking tape that you've laid across this section and pulled up, and like you're saying, a lot of this you're kind of dealing with the negative parts of peeling up things, and
I constantly have to keep that in mind and then forget it. I can't think about it consciously, but I have to be aware of the fact that that's what I'm doing. And so it's kind of a funny place to be, thinking about something you can't think about. It's very weird, but it's what happens.
When you do think about other painters or people that have influenced you, who do you think about? Who do you look at? Who do you find interesting these days?
Well, I think David Reed sometimes, because he's, I've always really liked his work a lot.
Yes, we love David Reed.
I think of Stephen Westfall because of his brain.
Okay.
He's got a magnificent brain, and I love talking to him because he's actually really, really intriguing theorist, and he's a good painter.
He is a good painter. I think he wrote the first review I ever got.
Raphael Rubinstein, I think about it not as a painter, but some of the poetic things. I think a lot of music. I think a lot about Ornette. I think a lot about Miles Davis, John Coltrane. I think a lot about some of the more experimental musicians that are out there.
Okay, this is titled Cutter.
Cutter, yeah.
And do you also have digital print in here?
It's a digital print. What happened was that we took a section of painting, photographed it, then we took this image and expanded the image and then laid it back down again, so that when we made the print, we've got a bigger version of this, and so we're dealing with scale within the painting itself. And
Okay, yeah, I can
happens
see
is
that you
this
got
is
the little bit larger section there.
This is all photographic, but it's a digital pigment print, and then this is the painted section in here. So again, you start going back and forth with this illusionistic sort of dream state that happens with all of these.
And I like the fact that there's the photograph of the linen, but this is actually on probably a nice prime cotton. Yeah. Okay, I like that. Well, we're going to wrap up looking at these two pieces.
And this is called emotional foreplay, and it's a good representation of how I feel about what happens when I'm in the studio working. And this was one of the first ones I dealt with when it came off the floor and then went onto the wall to be worked on again. So there was a lot of paint on this surface. Then I went ahead and went over the top of it with the emulsion again. So it kind of drove what was there first back, and then the paint that got laid up on top of it started that dimensionality again.
Now, you're using a lot of raw linen. Is that because you like the feel of the surface, or you like the color that you have with the natural linen, or?
I think I've got extremely comfortable with how you get comfortable with materials. And
yes.
As artists,
I'm looking at your holidays over here.
Yeah, we get very comfortable with the kind of, and so we make choices, like we make choices with our vocabulary. And that's part of my vocabulary as a painter. That linen has meaning because it's the basis from which I can start the process of making these things. They would come off completely different if that was a white surface. It wouldn't.
Yes, they would.
It wouldn't take the, how you see how this stuff jumps around in there, and that almost becomes like unconscious. It's unconscious viewing of the surface of the painting because you don't realize how important it is until you really get involved. It's like a lot of people will come and think Stryker, that's a blank surface over there.
Right.
But it's not a blank surface. There's a lot of action on that surface. And if you think of that action on that surface with color, that would be like insane. But it's because it's a monochromatic, two-tone emulsion that's on there. People get this kind of like
a different feeling for the surface, yeah. Okay, we're going to wrap up looking at this piece. It's another big piece.
It's called Einstein's Edge of Window.
Okay. Well, right off the bat, I'm thinking you've got this nice kind of geometrical ultramarine blue section on the right-hand side, and then on the left-hand side, you've got these more organic kind of, it's like big pieces of torn paper or something, kind of the raw floating cloud forms.
The edges, I mean, these edges mean a lot. The edges are really important.
Also, I like the way that we were talking about the raw linen, and as you start to build up the paintings, you're sort of filling out the space more and closing out the weave, but you're always leaving enough of the raw linen in there, and in certain ways it's kind of like a breathing space, I think. That's quite a nice little surface you've got on there. How long would a painting like this take you?
It took me 2 years to make
2 years.
It started out as 2 different paintings, and I couldn't get either one of them to work all that well, but I was working with the same blue tonalities in both, so I just stuck it together and
kept working. Okay.
You got to get to the end of the road, and that was the way I got to the end of this particular road. I like this painting a lot.
No, it's a beauty. It's a beauty. Big, big beauty. Anyway, so I've been talking to C. Michael Norton, and what was the title of the show again?
When Paintings Awake.
When Paintings Awake.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Lauren.
Here at
James.
David&SCHWEITZER. James Kalm, please. Here in the heart of Bushwick, 56 Bogart Street, and the show is open until when?
May 7th.
May 7th. Okay, and at this point, we all say, thank you, Kate. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
That was beautiful. What's your name?
Johnny B.
What is it?
Johnny B.
Johnny B. That was good, Johnny B.